Hi, everyone. I'm so glad you're back. For those of you who come to Growth Factor from time to time. Today, we have Janet Tarantino, and she is a retired network coordinator for a major corporation. She was involved in a car accident where she was saved by divine intervention. This accident was the catalyst to a more in-depth NDE, or near-death experience, where she discovered the answers about God, angels, consciousness, and more. I'm so excited to have Janet today, and I'm so glad you all are here. Janet, can you tell us your story?
Oh, yes, I'm so excited to be here because this is my favorite subject. I love to talk about spiritual experiences. It could be, especially since the primary goal about sharing is to give the grieving, the dying, and virtually everyone some semblance of peace that and hope that there's more after the physical body fails. We really are eternal beings who live on into eternity because we are spiritual beings experiencing life in tandem with this body that we chose. I'm a multiple near-death experiencer who has also had spiritual experiences too. I didn't know that until I was told to understand these moments, and I will get to that. But it seemed perfectly natural to me throughout my lifetime these happened. And I didn't realize that not everyone has them. But I think more people have them than we realize. They just don't recognize them. And then I'll also have no doubt that, like I said, that the listeners don't realize that they've had experiences with other souls that they've agreed to work with before incarnating into this world. My spiritual adventures, for example, started as a toddler when I had a fishbowl effect while looking out of the portholes of the baby girl that I was, and knew that our home that was being built, I knew what it was going to look like, and even though the construction was in the early stages. I felt like I was actually laying back in a recliner, looking out these portholes into this world. So that was my first experience with the porthole view as a spirit looking out of the eyes of this little girl. And my work history, like I said, was a long-time career, as a well-respected coordinator. My job required a high level of analytical, interpersonal, and organizational skills, as my area of responsibility covered 7-state area. And my goal was to get the product to the customer in the safest and most cost-effective way. So everything was analyzed. But I didn't realize till after these experiences that I was given those skills for a much higher purpose for what God had set out for me. So the spiritual experiences were not something that I had ever heard of or experienced in my younger days. That just was not in my field of family. But so one summer while I was on vacation, my life was forever changed after divine intervention saved me during a car accident. And before I continue, though, I would like to make clear that as I grew up Christian. So I refer to God as a male person, but the God I know is not a he or a she. It is an energetic living light made of unconditional love. God, the creator or super consciousness of all that is, and is the fabric of the universe, is beyond, but it's easier. It seems to be more understandable to call him a he rather than an it. It just doesn't seem personal enough. So please feel free to substitute your own terminology that is most comfortable for you as the listener. The car accident was, like I said, a catalyst to a more in-depth NDE where I met Jesus, the super consciousness known by some as God, and saw the nature of our spirit. It was when I met God and he embraced me and showed me video moments of my life and told me these moments matter, understand them. This was not a life review. I'd already left my body. This was the third one. It per se was not a life review per se, but instead it was films that revealed I not only had one NDE, I had 3 NDEs and other spiritual experiences well. The focus seemed to be on the spiritual experiences of my life up until then and others that were going to occur in the future. Each near-death or spiritual experience occurred during a different period of my life. So at first I didn't connect them together because they were so far apart. But when I was told to understand these moments and I started writing a timeline of events, it created a magnificent spiritual picture of our life's journey. The greater scope of these experiences cover not only what happens after we die, but it gives us insight about our life and our purpose here and now. It showed me that when I was pre-kindergarten age, I had a conversation with my mom. Well, she was on the phone with a friend. It was during the day, and I wasn't in kindergarten, so I was waiting for all the kids to get home from school. I was bored, and she was having a conversation about adoption. And so when she got off the phone, I asked her if I was adopted because I didn't quite feel a total part of this family. I still felt that there was something else that I was missing. I still felt that connection to heaven. But my mom says, no, silly, you're our little girl. So I took that as my answer. But the next thing out of my mouth, I'll never forget. I said, okay, but I'm going to die young. And at 4 or 5 years old, you have no concept of age. So I kind of wondered, what does that mean? And then I saw 3 visions go through in front of me. It was either in my mind, I couldn't tell if they were in front of me or in my mind, they were there. And it ended up being the 3 near-death experiences that I was scheduled to have that were going to come in the future. The first one happens when I had my first NDE at 15, when I became very ill. After I left my body, the ceiling of my room turned to clouds. Then in spirit, I looked at the clouds and saw 2 separate swirling motions, opening 2 tunnels into other dimensions. They were separate dimensions. In one opening on the left of the room, I saw a sumo wrestler who turned out to be my guide. In the other tunnel, I saw a beautiful woman dressed in white lace dress swish down into view, seemingly come riding in on the most beautiful heavenly music that sounded like angels singing. I thought of her as a music box lady and Daddy's little girl, because that's all I could associate her with at that time frame of my life. You know, we were, when I was young, there wasn't many TVs, you know, we played outside. So you didn't have a lot of the creativity on television. So you ended up having to use your own things that were around you to describe these kind of things. So music box lady and Daddy's little girl was how I thought of her. But many years later, I understood that the music box lady was my daughter, Gina. She had come to remind my guide and me that I was scheduled to be her mother. And if I died that night, she would not be born 15 years in the future. This is only one account that proves that we have soul contracts with other spirits, but there is more. The second NDE occurred during a severe car accident where I was saved by an angelic being I could feel, but I could not see. What makes this experience mind-blowing is that I had failed to put my seatbelt on. When I had saw in my rearview mirror that my car was going to be rear-ended, I, in desperation, called out in my mind, "Oh God, he's going to hit me." Instantaneously, I heard a voice. I was the only one in the car. It said, "Lay down across the seat and cover your face." So where was this voice coming from? But I did as I was told. I didn't have any time. As the car accident unfolded, I saw the window above me shatter in slow motion. Next, I felt the arms of an enormous, invisible celestial being pick me up like a child. After being picked up, I found myself looking down on the accident scene from another dimension through a hole in the clouds. Unlike my first NDE, when I could see into 2 other worlds, this time I was looking back from another world into this dimension through a hole in the cloud, even though it was a beautiful cloudless day. The cloud I was peering through was undoubtedly the veil that separates one world from another that we can't ordinarily see. Later, when I looked at the images of my smashed car, I realized I had been tossed around the car. Even though I did not feel the movement and the pain of being tossed around the car, I knew I was hurled into the back seat because the window I saw shattering was the rear window. What is miraculous is that the angelic being placed me back in the front seat where I laid down as instructed by the heavenly voice. Now, I have pictures in my book about all my near-death experiences and some of the spiritual experiences too. Like I've got a picture of what I drew of my daughter, what I saw, the sumo wrestler and my daughter, and how I found out who it was. My daughter's was in a picture that I didn't have. And when I saw that, she was standing in a position that it was unquestionably the music box lady that I had already drawn years before. The car accident is in the book when it shows the pile of rubble, I guess you could say, of my car, where I should have walked, I should have been killed in that accident. The third brush with death was an allergy-induced NDE, when my breathing had been cut off due to congestion. After leaving my body, I found myself floating in a velvety darkness of love. During the experience, I saw a silver cord float by. The silver cord is the tether that connects our spirit body to our physical body and us to heaven. The consciousness connection makes us all part of one larger celestial body and links each of us together. So we are all one body. Then I discovered the nature of our spirit when I watched my spirit leave the lower half of my body. My soul appeared to be made of a shimmering blue energy, the color of the sky on a beautiful day. Because I was connected with the universal consciousness at that time, I knew this was my own sliver of the universal consciousness some call God. I watched my spirit lift out of my legs because I was my spirit consciousness that had already left the upper part of my body. My spirit stretched to exit the body, probably because it was not really my time to go, and it didn't know if it wanted to come out, but then it did. Then it transformed as my energy pulled up to me. I transformed into one shape again, but this time the blue spirit body morphed into a glowing orb of light, sitting in a wand of love, a wand that kids blow bubbles from. It felt like that, only really cushy, made of love. And next, Jesus arrived, and then God came through the darkness as a living light of loving energy. And after God arrived, he reached his rainbow arms out and embraced me. While he held me, he showed me many movies of moments of my life and told me these moments matter, understand them. Some videos I recognized from my past, yet some I did not recognize because they had not happened yet. I wanted to understand the flicks, of course, in heaven. So the angels came to me to convince me to stay. However, I still wanted to go, even with what they showed me. So before entering God's light, because I was right on the precipice of going into the light, I was shown one more image that made me choose to stay in this world instead of going to heaven. And that image was my son, Kurt. When I saw Kurt's image, I knew something was going to happen to him in the future. And if I did not stay, his life would go down a darker pathway. And that's when I told Jesus, I'm not ready to go yet. Then I turned back into my blue spirit body and sat my spirit butt down in Jan's butt. I slipped a spirit foot into each of her legs, but not totally. I put my spirit hands on my spirit knees and I started rocking back and forth until I, Jan's spirit consciousness, got up enough momentum to lay down, snap back in, and help my body sit up and gasp for air. Then I had to live my life wondering when the other shoe was going to drop for my son, Kurt. There's many details that I left out, but I will cover more of the details in my next talk. But none of my talks cover the whole scope of events. There is much more that hasn't been shared on any interview.
Thank you, Janet. Oh my gosh, that's incredible. And I could tell, you compacted it so tightly and it's so wonderful. We got to experience a lot of it. I think a lot of us are very visual, so I was able to see a lot of it, the silver cord and all that. So thank you. I know that this information you're sharing will help a lot of people with their loss. Some people have had serious loss, so they need to hear from you, or they're just feeling doom and gloom, depression, anxiety, stress. So thank you. This is beautiful. Before we go, and I'd like to do a part 2, so you can click below and find much more detail for Janet. And I want to say I have a few questions for part 2. One is why the sumo wrestler, possibly if you ever figured out why it was a sumo wrestler, which we'll talk about in part 2 if possible, and how long it took you to be able to describe all this, because I know I've heard it takes at least 7 years to be able to verbalize what you just verbalized. I've heard as much as 20 years. So I'd like to ask you that. And also to talk about, I know you took care of your parents for many years and they shared a lot of their otherworldly experiences. So I'd like to talk about that in part 2. But real quick, can you tell me, how do you help people, what your website is, what your book is?
I help them, of course, by sharing my book. That's why God told me to write it. I was actually instructed to write it and make it about him. And that can be found on Amazon, but I also have it on my website, janettarantino.com. There is a page that has, let's see, let's go to Dying to See. Go to the Dying to See tab. And if you scroll down, I believe there is the book toward the bottom. You can, and it's got Amazon, Barnes and Noble, IndieBound, BAM. You can click on those links to take you directly to those ordering sites to purchase the book. And if you purchase it, please don't forget to rate my book too. That would sure help my standings. And I also have a page that has for the spiritual study. I am working on my next book, which is to share the story of what my parents shared with me during their dying process. And I'm sharing other people's stories, near-death experiences, spiritual experiences, dream visions. It's virtually a whole mirage of stories, because so many people have a calling, a need to share their story, but they don't feel like their story is big enough for a book. So this is an opportunity to share their story and get the healing and the completion of their near-death experience to help them as that they actually did share their story with the world. So that's how I'm helping people. So there is on the website a special spiritual study site that you can go, and you can, if you want to participate in the next book, just write me there or write to my contact page there too, and tell me that you'd like to share your story. Write it up and send it to me, because I don't have time to write everybody's story, but I would be happy to take a look at it and see where it fits in and be in contact with you.
Thank you, Janet. How fun that some people who are listening could be part of your book. That's really wonderful, because I know it's very cathartic for people. Some people don't want to share their stories, but some people find it very cathartic, and the people who read it can find it so comforting. So that's yes, wonderful that you're able to help people share their stories. I think before we go into part 2, which is much more in depth, if you could tell people how to reach you on your website or email, phone number, all the ways to be able to reach you, and I'll put it in the description below.
Okay, through janettarantino.com, there is a contact page. And you can also, at the bottom of the pages on my website, so all my social media links, the YouTube, the Facebook, Instagram, etc. And you can write to me also at my email, which is janettarantinoauthor@gmail.com.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I'll also put my contact in there. It's growthfactor.org@gmail.com in case you want to be on the show and share your spiritual story. It could be any spiritual, inspiring story. And I also do hypnotherapy to help you with your anxiety, doom, and a whole lot more. It's growthfactor.org@gmail.com. And thanks, everyone, for being here. See you down below in part 2.
Thank you.
Thank you.